This episode is brought to you by the lovely humans at 111 Minna. For more than 30 years, 111 Minna Gallery has supported local artists, musicians, DJs, comics, and performers in their bar/art gallery/performance space. It's the perfect place to go for a quiet drink during their happy hours, where you can bring your date and show them that you're in on all those cool spots that only locals know about. 111 Minna also opened their coffee shop if you need a third space to do your work outside the office. Or you can treat yourself to a night at one of their dance parties, gallery openings, or comedy nights and meet some of the people who make this city so amazing. Sound familiar? So if you're one of those people like me who want to see a healthy, happy, vibrant San Francisco, you can do so by keeping places like 111 Minna alive and thriving. Check out their website at 111minnagallery.com and browse all that they're doing on their calendar.
All of us were imbued with a sense of service and of community and of, I come from a family of healers, really, and that's something I've tried to carry through my life.
That was San Francisco Board of Supervisors-President Aaron Peskin. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco, a podcast about the artists, activists, and small businesses that make this city what it is. This episode is the official kickoff of Season 7 of Storied. Welcome to Part 1 with Aaron. Born and raised in Berkeley, Aaron has led a remarkable life. In this episode, he'll walk us through his family's story, going back to his parents' family's migration to the U.S. and up to his own time in college at UC Santa Cruz. Quick shout out to Otis McDonald, who, for the 7th season in a row, has handpicked the opening and closing music for this show. Here's Aaron Peskin.
That is an international story that starts on my mother's side in Russia, where we know a lot. Her father was one of, I believe, 5 kids born into a Jewish family in, I believe, St. Petersburg.
Okay.
And
Northern and Western, extreme
Russia.
And
the 5 brothers, 2 of them stay in Russia. One of them comes to San Francisco, California. The other 2 work their way across Russia. I think they are Mensheviks as the Bolshevik, or I forget how it works, but
okay.
They realize it's time to go.
This is 1910s?
This is the teens. I think this is the teens.
19-teens, okay.
And the 2 brothers, over the course of a year, walking, taking local transportation, taking jobs in different villages, work their way all the way to the Mediterranean, get on a boat, and end up in Haifa in Palestine.
Okay.
And my grandfather starts by planting trees, eventually ends up in Tel Aviv. My mother is born in 1940, when it's still Palestine.
My mother, born in 40 as well, but not in Palestine.
And she is 8 years old when it becomes the nation state of Israel.
Right.
She comes here and meets my father at the age of 23 in 1963.
I gotta ask, what brought her? And where?
What brought her was she came here to visit her older sister, who was teaching Hebrew school at a temple in Oakland, California. And she came here to visit her older sister, met my father, and they got married 5 weeks later and lived happily ever after.
I feel like there's a lot of those, like, we met and then 2 weeks later.
And they were in love for 52 years until my father passed away 6 years ago. And it was a pretty idyllic, lovely, caring, nurturing family. And my father, his parents immigrated from well, depending on what period of time it was Belarus or Poland. It went back and forth. They got out while the getting was good. Were not slaughtered in the Holocaust.
So also Jewish.
Also Jewish.
Okay.
Ended up in New York City running the corner candy store. And my father was the only kid in his family to go to college. He went to City College of New York and did very well and got accepted to UC Berkeley, got on a Greyhound bus with a one-way ticket to get his doctorate in psychology, but was promptly drafted by his Brooklyn draft board and sent to Fort Ord for basic training during the Korean War.
Okay.
But when he finished that stint, he came back and then actually went to Fort Sam in Texas.
Okay, I don't know Fort Sam.
I think Fort Sam is San Antonio, I think.
Okay.
And then finished his doctorate and
Did he actually go to Korea?
He did not actually physically go to Korea, but was a Korean War vet.
Right.
And then he came back here, finished his doctorate, and got a job at San Francisco State, where he taught for 40 years. And I still bump into his students on the streets of this city to this day. Matter of fact, a few months ago, randomly, a former student of his wanted to have lunch with me, and we were at Max's on Van Ness Avenue, and he was telling me about how my father was a profound influence in his life. And as we were sitting there, this elegant African-American guy stopped at our table, and he points to me and says, "Are you," and I'm thinking he's going to say Supervisor Peskin, but no, he says, "Are you Harvey Peskin's son?"
Oh.
And I say, "Yes, I am." And he says his name, and I say, "Mike Roosevelt, meet Mike Augustin." And they were both students of my father.
Wow.
And so then, so my father and mother settled in Berkeley after they got married in 1963. I came along in 1964.
I have to ask quickly about your dad, because SF State in the 60s.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about him? Like, did he pass down story? I mean, you were very young, but...
I remember, this could be the 70s. I think this was the 70s because, this was the foment of the African-American studies and the student strike. And I remember all of that at a distance. And I remember more particularly my father's antipathy to the very right-wing president of San Francisco State, Sam Hayakawa, who went on to become a United States senator representing the great state of California. But all of that was going on. But what I also remember the incredible moment when my father, who was a psychologist, was teaching classes with Michael Krasny of KQED, who was a English literature professor, and they were doing classes on Freudian interpretations of Shakespeare, and I still see some of these people. It was called the Nexus program. I mean, it was a time of, educational change and
flourish.
Yeah, flourish. Exactly right. Yes.
This is like when Sesame Street
happened.
And
then Sesame. I remember the early days of Oscar. But so I went to the first fully integrated public school class from kindergarten through 12th grade in the Berkeley public schools.
Okay.
And my claim to fame is that I went to kindergarten through third grade with Kamala Harris. I don't mean the same school. I mean the same kindergarten, first, second, and third grade class.
Okay.
Mrs. Rader's kindergarten class. Yep. Mrs. Wilson's first grade class. She was a profound influence. And Vice President Harris now remembers Mrs. Wilson. We've had that conversation. Yeah. Mrs. Hotta's second grade class and Mrs. Jones's third grade class, and I have the photos to prove it.
Oh yes, I wonder, can we get those photos for this podcast?
Yes, I can give them to you.
I mean, anyone roughly our age, if you look at their where they line you up and the short kids are down here and the tall kids are over here.
Oh, these are class pictures with individual photos.
Oh, with individual
photos. I can show them to you.
Almost like a yearbook.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, my goodness, there's so much to unpack there, but maybe let's kind of whittle it down to you, do you have any siblings?
I do. I have a younger brother, 3 years younger than me, who I'm the black sheep in the family. My mother got a doctorate in social work. My father had a doctorate in psychology. And my brother is also a professor at Arizona State University and is a leading scholar on international justice, the politics of genocide and war crime tribunals, kind of dark stuff.
Is that all?
Yeah, but I barely managed to eke out a bachelor's degree in, of all fields, modern society and social thought from UC Santa Cruz, the undergraduate history of consciousness major.
I'm laughing, but also you're roughly, I see a connection with all four of you and your chosen.
Yeah, I mean,
what you're doing in the world.
All of us were imbued with a sense of service and of community and of. I mean, I come from a family of healers, really, and that's something I've tried to carry through my life.
They happen to be scholars. That's all.
They happen to be, yes, yes, exactly.
All of them, but you, yeah.
But I mean, they're both my parents are therapists, and even as my father was at State and my mother at UC Berkeley, they always had private patients. My mother went on actually to run the East Oakland Youth and Family Center, working with troubled youth and their families. So that's kind of informed my background too.
That's very community service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually some of the social workers that she recruited in those days in the 70s are San Francisco people from the Bayview district.
Right. Amazing. Do you want to share with folks, so 64, so you grew up in the, let's just call it the 70s, maybe a little bit of late 60s, but mostly the 70s.
Yeah, we were wearing silk shirts with prints on them and Earth, Wind, and Fire and Tower of Power.
Yeah. Sly?
Sly and the Family Stone, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of things were you doing, let's say, as a teenager in Berkeley? And, because this is a podcast about San Francisco, obviously Berkeley's a huge part of your story, but were you coming to the city?
Well,
what kind of things were you doing?
interestingly enough, San Francisco was always part of my early childhood and my development for a number of reasons. My mother and father actually had their first dates and courted on Broadway and would go see Lenny Bruce and actually got to know Lenny Bruce.
Wow.
And
was he ever arrested here?
I feel like the answer is yes. I believe he
Chances
was
are very
arrested
good.
in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But my parents not only took us to San Francisco, but were really interested in showing us all the aspects of San Francisco. So my parents used to take us to the fabled Ernie's restaurant with tableside Caesar salad service. I mean, these were two, college professors, but they did special stuff. We would go see the Macy's windows during the holiday season. So yeah, San Francisco is definitely a big part of my upbringing. And my father, I was always amazed because as a guy who worked at San Francisco State, who placed many of his students in programs in the city, Rams in the Richmond, the Jewish Home on Silver. But I was always impressed because he always knew special routes around traffic.
Yes. The taxi driver mentality.
He had the taxi driver mentality. Yes. Absolutely.
I feel like if you drive for just a few minutes in the city, you figure those things out.
Yeah. I would remember how he could get off the freeway, get on city streets, and then get back on the freeway.
Yeah.
But
not a sucker.
No.
Not a sucker.
Not a sucker. But my high school in Berkeley was a pretty idyllic time. Did you go to Berkeley High? Or I went to Berkeley High.
Okay, that was or is the one.
It is the one public high school in Berkeley, and I fell in with a group of friends who are still my friends to this day. Excellent. And I keep up with. As a matter of fact, I just turned 60 last month, and I went
belated happy birthday.
A friend's who's not part of my tight group, 60th birthday, and saw all of these people who I went to high school with and Martin Luther King Jr. High School with, and it was just kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But fell in with a group, and the 5 of us were all about weekend hiking and backpacking trips from the moment we could drive. I
was going to say the car.
Which in those days was 15 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And when you find your oldest friend that gets the first license, it's all over for everyone.
We would go to the Sierra, and we would go to the Trinity Alps, and we would go hang out in Tilden Park. And we would also, interestingly enough, one of them, I talked to him just a few weeks ago, was super into martial arts and Chinatown, and we would come to Chinatown and see kung fu films. We would go to the Keystone on Broadway and see The Cure and punk rock bands.
Oh.
So San Francisco was still part of my life then.
Did you go to the MAB?
We went to the Mabuhay, yes. As a matter of fact, the woman who ran the Mabuhay is still a friend of mine today.
Excellent. What kind of bands did you see at the MAB?
Oh, man.
You already mentioned The Cure is one of my favorites.
The Cure is what I'm thinking about.
And that must have been The Cure when, like, in their early days. They've been around since, like, the late 70s.
The Greg Kinn Band.
Oh, yes.
Boy, this is coming out of the recesses of my mind.
Let's dig, Aaron. Let's dig.
KALX was our radio station.
Yes.
Early Talking Heads.
I just listened to them in the shower.
Yes, and the Greek theater was a big part of my growing up, where we would go and, it could be the Talking Heads one day and it could be Grateful Dead the next. So shows were a part of my high school experience.
And what a location, the Greek, I'm sorry.
The Greek theater in Berkeley? Yeah.
And it sounds good.
That's where I graduated from. That was my Berkeley High graduation, was on that stage. Yeah.
Excellent.
And the commencement speaker was Tom Bates, who was variously the mayor of Berkeley and then later on a California State Assembly member for many years, and crazy later when I became a member of the Board of Supervisors and was appointed to serve on the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. He was my seatmate because he was mayor of Berkeley in those days.
Right.
And so life came full circle.
Love it. So you graduate.
Actually, on life coming full circle, my high school girlfriend, who later on realized that she was a lesbian, I presided over her wedding to her wife in 2004 during the Winter of Love.
Yes, that brief moment.
Yes, talk about wrapping up a chapter.
And that must have been 20-ish years after. What year did you graduate?
Let's see. I graduated from Berkeley High in 1982, but interestingly enough, me and my core group of pals graduated a semester early. We had...
How'd you swing that?
How you swing that is you take AP classes and you get credit for AP classes. So we had satisfied all of our classes, and as a result, we all got into a van, the 5 of us, and drove around the Western United States and Canada for 100 days in a life-changing experience.
You can't see the chills
It
all
was
over my body.
Amazing.
That sounds so great.
And we left on, I guess it would be February 2nd. It took us like a month to outfit the van, an old Econoline van, and our first day we drove up to Yosemite. The van broke down. One of my pals was an incredible car mechanic, and he fixed it. And we went through down to Sequoia Kings Canyon, down to Death Valley, out to the Grand Canyon, up through the Rockies into Wyoming and Montana and Alberta and British Columbia and down through Washington State, and then drove that Econoline van onto the Berkeley High campus and spent our last night there. And when we woke up in the morning, everybody was going to class, and
all the other people who had to finish that semester.
Yep. Yeah. And then
did you have a name for this little
Yes,
come on.
we called ourselves the Ganny Warriors.
Ganny Warriors. It sounds a lot like a band.
Yeah,
But
kind
you
of.
weren't playing music.
We were not. No,
or-
we were not playing music.
Okay.
We were listening to a lot of music in that van.
8-track or cassette?
It was cassette.
Yes.
It was definitely cassette by that time. And we outfitted that van for sound, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And all 5 of us could sleep in there together.
Yeah. Did you build a little
We built a little
loft,
platform, a little loft in there,
Yeah.
and the 2 short ones, me and Lauren, would sleep on the loft, and the 3 tall ones slept beneath
More
us.
leg room down
Exactly.
there. Yeah.
And then a few of us went off to UC Santa Cruz together, and we got spread to the 4 winds. And actually 2 of us, the one who was the kung fu guy at our first year in college, decided, against my parents' advice and will, to take the spring semester off, and we rode our bicycles from California to North Carolina up to Washington, D.C. over the course of 53 days. So I had a lot of like travel informed. I mean, I learned about America. in
The
that
world. Yeah. And yeah. I mean, there's so much. We're going to get to this much later. I'm like, you could have stopped. You've done a lot of living at what, 22 or 3?
Yeah, it was a very. I mean, I it's funny.
You've seen a lot of stuff.
I remember thinking in high school that my life would never get better, and I mean, I've had a really good full life and continue to do so, but it was pretty amazing. Like, and I knew how special it was.
Okay. And that's, I think, important. You weren't taking it for granted.
No, I realized that
savoring
I was lucky and blessed.
Okay, Santa Cruz. Not totally different. It's not the Bay Area, but it's adjacent, right? It's a familiar.
It was far enough away from home, but not too far. And so I didn't have, my parents up in my business every day, and I could make my own life. But it was close enough that I could, go back to my community. And
At
it
your
was
choosing.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, on your own.
Right. Had to figure out how to do my own laundry. Santa Cruz was also an amazing experience.
Yeah. This is kind of mid-'80s?
This was starting in 1982.
Okay.
And I've always been curious about all sorts of things. And I ended up becoming an animal behavior, specifically northern elephant seals, Moronga angustirostris, they are called in Latin. Okay. And I ended up being part of a team that lived on Año Nuevo Island off of the coast of the southern San Mateo border, and would take a little Zodiac out there and spend 3 days at a time doing animal behavior research. And it was amazing. And I lived in experimental housing at Kresge College, one of the UC Santa Cruz colleges, where we had no walls.
Okay.
And 6 of us, they were called the sextets, and 6 of us lived together in this experimental space.
Commune-ish?
Not exactly. I mean, it was student housing,
still,
but we learned to share all of the tasks and meals together, and that was a phenomenal experience. Created our own spaces, but I mean, these were all open floor plates. Yeah. And it was really remarkable. And academically, it was really a candy store for me.
Yeah. Were you majoring in marine biology?
I actually, interestingly enough, started out thinking I was going to become an earth sciences, geology person. Until I realized that I was not structured for PChem. Math.
Please explain what that is. Sorry.
Physical chemistry.
Got it.
So yes, I managed to complete algebra in high school, and I was not gonna work my way through calculus. So I ended up in a multifaceted liberal arts program that I don't think exists anymore, called Modern Society and Social Thought.
You had already mentioned that. That's
and my early And I think that's kind of part of UC Santa Cruz was part of my early political awakening, which of all things actually was a symbolic fight over whether or not the beloved informal mascot of UC Santa Cruz, the banana slug. So when I first arrived there in 1982, that was the ha-ha, mascot, but there was no official mascot, but everybody kind of knew it was the mascot. And my then roommate, Pete Blackshaw, actually made a shirt with the banana slug. And lo and behold, the chancellor of UC Santa Cruz, Robert Sinsheimer, decided one day to unilaterally declare that the sea lion was the mascot of UC Santa Cruz, and we rebelled. Yes. And I was never not in high school, not in college, a student government type. I was a free spirit, and that was not my thing. But Pete, on the other hand, was involved in student government, and I kind of scratch my head about why somebody would go to these meetings. But he devised this plan to have the student government vote on it. And the student government said we should have the banana slug be the official mascot, to which the chancellor said, "Thank you very much for your advice. I'm the chancellor." And I then came up with this notion that we should hold a vote of the student body, and of all of the students. And so we created these polling places in the 10 colleges, and not surprisingly, overwhelmingly the vote was for the banana slug, to which the chancellor said, "My way or the highway." And then
Reagan acolyte or something?
Something like that. He was a scientist. And long story short, we then ended up actually getting articles in the San Francisco Chronicle. It was a kind of funny ha-ha thing, and ultimately embarrassed the administration into accepting the banana slug as the official mascot of UC Santa Cruz. That was my earliest political involvement.
Was your name in that Chronicle ad as part of the
Gosh, I don't remember. It could be. But
it seemed
like a very important thing at the time.
Yes. Thank you. Let's see. What I'm wondering is, so we're talking, what year did you graduate Santa Cruz?
It's a good question. I think the answer is 1987.
Okay.
It took me a little while. 87. I'm pretty sure it was 87.
Okay.
I'm getting old. But the interesting thing is that I, in Berkeley, grew up around the corner from a kid who was a friend whose parents were huge Himalayan mountain climbers. And I would go to their house, and they'd have these beautiful pictures of, the Himalayas. And I always, all of us wanted to go to Nepal. And I always had a job, starting
in college.
No. In high school. In high school, I worked at a camera store, Palmer's Camera. Yeah. I started working there. I needed to get actually a permit because I was underage, and I did that after school got out, and I had a worker's permit. Palmer's Camera at 48 Shattuck Square, where University and Shattuck get together. Yeah. Anyway. And I saved up a bunch of money, and I continued to work there summers during college. And I, together with two of my high school pals, decided that we would go to Asia, specifically headed to Nepal, and I thought I would come back 3 months later. I came back a year and 4 months later.
Oh, wow. What all treks or climbs did you do?
So me and my friend John Brody, who still lives in the East Bay, went to Indonesia, worked our way up through Java and Sumatra to Malaysia, up through Thailand, and then flew to India and worked our way across India. We were actually going to spend more time in India, but Indira Gandhi was assassinated on October 30th of 1984.
Wow.
And we decided it was time to get out of town.
Yeah.
And we smartly made it to the Nepali border and got on a night bus and ended up in Kathmandu, where we found our friend who was the kid who we went to kung fu movies with in Chinatown.
Just on the other side of the world.
And the three of us spent 33 days hiking around Annapurna into the Annapurna Sanctuary, and then went, and we had no idea that you could live on, in those days, literally a couple of dollars a day.
Yeah.
And then we went back down to India in December and went all over India, and then went back to Nepal and went to Everest Base Camp and that entire Khumbu region that spring. Anyway, we bounced around that part of the world for a year and 4 months.
Okay, and was this in the middle of college?
This was in the middle of college. That's why it took me a bunch of years. And then I came back, and I was too late to get housing to go to Santa Cruz. And so, believe it or not, I set up a tent in the woods. And for my first 10
in Big
weeks...
Basin?
No, up above Peskin College.
Right.
And I would sleep in my tent at night and take it down and stick it under a log, and then go to class every day and study in the library, and then at night would wander back out into the forest and set up my tent.
It's your life, but it kind of sounds like a movie.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Aaron Peskin. Check back next week to hear the evolution of Aaron's life in politics, including my first brush with him in 2000 and up to his run for San Francisco mayor today. Part 2 drops next Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Our contributing producer is Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 7th season, we have more than 220 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If possible, please rate and review the show. I want to know what you think. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at StoriedSF, and reach out to us there or email us at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Be extra careful crossing the street. And keep being wacky, creative, and kind out there. See you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support repatriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.